If your watch loses 3 seconds a day, you don't take it to a repair shop. You throw it in the trash, and you find a weapon. In the old economy, time was money. In this economy, time is the exact boundary between a normal business day and a brutal liquidation. People who survive don't look at the sky to admire the view. They look at the solar angle indicator on their dashboard to calculate their remaining minutes of life. The infection hit the optical nerves first. Under direct sunlight, the ultraviolet wavelengths cook their exposed corneas, forcing them into a state of vegetative paralysis. They drop wherever they are on the sidewalks, over the steering wheels of abandoned sedans, across the threshold of retail stores. They don't move. They don't breathe in a way that generates noise. They are dormant assets, waiting for the sun to drop below a specific measurement. But the moment the light fades, their pupils dilate to the edge of their irises. Their retinas maximize low-light tracking. They don't just see in the dark, they interpret motion with the precision of a high-speed camera. They become the night shift. And the night shift has a 100% employment rate. Because of this biological constraint, human civilization had to contract its entire industrial output into an 8-hour window, from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Every delivery truck, every agricultural tractor, every distribution hub must operate simultaneously under the eye of the sun. Think about the infrastructure required to move food for millions of people when you only have 480 minutes to do it. The highways aren't just roads anymore. They are pressurized tubes. If a single vehicle stalls on the interstate at 2 in the afternoon, it doesn't cause a traffic delay. It causes a logistical chain reaction that ends with hundreds of people being caught in the dark. I manage logistics for Sector 4, a manufacturing corridor outside what used to be Columbus. My job isn't to fight the dead, it's to audit the minutes. I sit in a reinforced dispatch tower with 3 atomic clocks synchronized to the national standard. I track 32 armored cargo transports moving across the state lines. Each transport carries refined synthetic polymers used to seal the filtration systems of the regional grid. If a transport arrives late, the grid seals fail, the air goes bad, and the sector loses productivity. My metrics are absolute. If a driver falls behind schedule by more than 12 minutes, their automated route is terminated, the gates lock them out, and they are marked as an acceptable loss on the corporate ledger. Today was a high-volume run. Transport 11, driven by a veteran operator named Gavin, was hauling 40 tons of polymer from the chemical plant. The route was 90 miles of open 2-lane highway. The math was planed at 60 miles per hour. Gavin needed exactly 90 minutes to clear the bottleneck at the Scioto River Bridge. He departed at 12 noon. He was scheduled to clear the gate at 1:30, leaving a 2-hour buffer before the solar angle dropped to the critical point. At 1:15, Gavin's telemetry signal wavered. The pressure in his secondary hydraulic line dropped by 15%. A minor leak. In the old days, you pull over to the shoulder, you call road assistance, you lose an afternoon. Today, pulling over means you are choosing to gamble with the dusk. Gavin didn't stop. He pushed the rig to 70 miles per hour, trying to outrun the mechanical failure, but the friction heated the unlubricated bearings. By 1:25, the front left wheel assembly seized. The tire blew, ripping through the reinforced wheel well and throwing 40 tons of steel into a jackknife across both lanes of the highway. I saw the telemetry turn red on my main monitor. The impact metric registered as a 4GS. Gavin was alive, but his truck was an immovable block of metal blocking the only high-speed corridor into Sector 4. And behind him were 7 other cargo transports, all traveling in a tight convoy to maximize aerodynamic efficiency and fuel conservation. 80,000 tons of critical supplies and 8 human drivers trapped 60 miles out from the perimeter gates. The time was exactly 1:28 in the afternoon. They had 2 hours and 32 minutes of guaranteed sunlight left. The radio channel erupted with the voices of the 7 drivers behind Gavin. They weren't panicking about their lives yet. They were panicking about their logs. They knew the protocol. If the road isn't clear by 2:30, the dispatch tower flags the entire convoy as unviable. "Tower, this is convoy lead, Transport 12, a voice crackled through the speaker. It was a driver named Marcus. "We have a total blockage at mile marker 42. Gavin's rig is sideways. The cab is jammed into the concrete barrier. We need a heavy recovery vehicle out here now. If we don't get a tow crane, we aren't making the gate." I looked at my recovery metrics. A heavy tow truck from the sector garage takes 45 minutes to reach mile marker 42. It takes 30 minutes to hook and drag a jackknife semi, then 45 minutes to return. That's 120 minutes total, assuming zero complications. If I dispatched the crane at 1:30, it would return at 3:30. That leaves a 30-minute margin before the sun drops behind the ridge. But the crane uses an older diesel engine with a high thermal signature. The heat index today was already high, meaning the engine would run hot, attracting the dormant things in the ditches if the sun dipped even slightly behind a cloud. More importantly, the financial cost of losing that recovery crane was higher than the projected value of the 3 rear transports in the convoy. "Negative, Transport 12, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of any human inflection. "Recovery assets will not be deployed. The round-trip transit time presents a negative return on investment for the sector. You have 2 hours and 32 minutes to clear the obstruction using onboard equipment, or you will prepare for route termination." "Are you insane, Tower?" Marcus shouted. "Gavin is pinned in the cab. We can't just leave the rig here. We don't have the tools to move 40 tons of dead weight without a crane." "Then you have a resource allocation problem, Marcus," I replied. "If you stay behind that truck, your clock keeps running. At 4:15, the perimeter gates close. They do not open for late arrivals. If you are outside the walls when the light fails, your survival probability hits 0. Figure it out." I cut the audio link. On the monitors, I watched the satellite feed of the highway. The 7 trucks behind Gavin had stopped in a neat line. The drivers were stepping out of their cabs, their high-visibility vests bright against the gray asphalt. They were carrying heavy steel cables and crowbars. They didn't go to help Gavin out of the crushed cab. They went straight to the coupling mechanism of his trailer. They were going to try to detach the cargo and drop it, then use 2 of the other trucks to ram the empty tractor out of the way. It was a rational decision. Gavin was a depreciating asset. The road was the only thing that mattered. Through the camera, I could see the landscape around them. The highway was bordered by dense fields of unharvested corn, dried to a pale yellow by the sun. Inside those fields, beneath the stalks where the light couldn't penetrate fully, thousands of dormant bodies were lying in the dirt. They looked like logs. They were completely motionless, their skin leathered by the heat, waiting for the shadow lines to lengthen. If a single driver dropped a tool, if a single metal strike generated a sound above 80 decibels, the vibration would ripple through the soil. The dormant state is stable under UV light, but it responds to seismic metrics. Marcus was working on the kingpin hitch. I could see his movements through the high-resolution lens. His face was covered in sweat, his skin turning a dark pink under the sun. He was forcing a massive pry bar into the locking jaw. Beside him, another driver was hooking a heavy steel line to the bumper of Transport 13. "Tower," Marcus's voice came back on the secure channel. He was breathing heavily, his words clipped by exhaustion. "The hitch is warped from the impact. It won't disengage. We're going to have to use an acetylene torch to cut the frame. That's going to take 20 minutes. We are losing our buffer." I checked the atomic clock. 1:45. "You have 15 minutes before your route is officially flagged as dead, Marcus," I said. "If the road isn't open by 2 o'clock, the automated system will reallocate the sector grid power away from your destination gate to reinforce the southern manufacturing zone. The gate will lose operational capacity. You won't just be late, you will have no entry point. We are doing the work." "Tower! Just hold the power allocation." "The algorithm handles allocation, Marcus, not me." I don't override the system for a delay that was caused by an uninspected hydraulic line. Gavin's maintenance logs were deficient. This is a predictable failure. I could see Marcus look up at the sky. The sun was directly overhead, but a bank of high-altitude clouds was moving in from the west. If those clouds blocked the sun for more than 4 minutes, the UV index would drop below the threshold of vegetative paralysis. The things in the cornfields would enter their transition phase. They wouldn't be full predators yet, but they would begin to crawl toward the source of the heat. On the screen, a man was using the torch. Bright sparks rained down onto the asphalt. The sound of the pressurized gas was a hiss that carried across the open valley. In the ditch 50 yards away, a log-like shape shifted. It was subtle, just a leg drawing inward. Then another shape, closer to the fence line, tilted its head toward the highway. They were waking up early because the cloud cover was beginning to filter the light. "Marcus," I said, my hand hovering over the log override. "Your thermal signature is spiking due to the torch. You have entities entering the transition phase at your 5 o'clock. Distance is 40 meters. If you don't drop the equipment and move, you will be audited before the cutoff time." Marcus didn't answer over the radio. I saw him drop the torch, grab his rifle from the cab, and point it toward the ditch. He didn't fire. Firing a weapon is a 300 decibel event. It would wake up the entire county. He just stood there, his weapon raised, while the other drivers worked on the chain. The time was 1:55. The steel frame of the trailer finally cracked. The driver of Transport 13 slammed the rig into reverse, the tires smoking against the tar, and slammed the rear of his truck into the jackknifed cab. The impact was loud, a metallic boom that echoed through the hills. Gavin's truck shifted 3 feet. It wasn't enough to open a lane, but it was enough to clear the trailer hitch. "Now," Marcus screamed into his microphone. "Dram it again." Transport 13 backed up 20 yards, then accelerated forward, hitting the dead truck at 30 miles per hour. The steel cab of Gavin's truck crumpled like aluminum foil. The force of the blow finally broke the concrete barrier, pushing the wreckage over the edge of the embankment and down into the ravine below. The road was open. One lane was clear, but the impact had triggered the net. From the cornfields, hundreds of shapes were rising. They weren't running yet, their eyes were still adjusting to the light, their movements slow and heavy like animals waking from a winter sleep. But they were moving toward the highway. They were forming a wall of bodies across the clear lane. Marcus scrambled back into the cab of Transport 12. The remaining 7 trucks started their engines, their large engines roaring in unison. "We are moving! Tower!" Marcus yelled. "Tell the gate we are coming in hot!" "You have 58 minutes to cover 60 miles, Marcus," I said, watching the cloud cover completely block the sun. The UV indicator on my screen dropped into the red zone. "And you have an optimization problem. The road ahead of you is occupied by 300 transitioning entities. If you slow down to avoid them, your average speed drops below 60 miles per hour. If your speed drops, you miss the gate." "We aren't slowing down," Marcus said. His voice was no longer angry. It had turned into the cold, dead tone of a man who had accepted the terms of the lease. "Tell Gavin's family his contract is fulfilled." The lead transport accelerated, its massive steel plow cutting through the first wave of transitioning bodies like a tractor through dirt. The spray was a dark, frozen red against the windshield. The convoy formed a tight line, bumper to bumper, moving at 70 miles per hour through a storm of flesh and gray fur. I watched the clock tick to 2 o'clock. The lane was open, but the convoy's fuel consumption had increased by 20% due to the resistance of the impacts. Their telemetry showed that Transport 15 was running low on diesel. The driver had left his engine idling during the repair work, a clear violation of the efficiency manual. If the truck ran out of fuel on the highway, the convoy would have to make another calculation. Do they stop to transfer the fuel, or do they leave another asset behind? I looked at the atomic clock, then at the clouds on the horizon. The daylight was fading faster than the digital countdown predicted. The audit wasn't just happening on my screen, it was happening in the atmosphere. The night shift was coming early, and the gate was still 60 miles away. The sound of meat hitting steel armor plates at 70 miles per hour is a wet, heavy thud that loses its shock value after the first 100 impacts. On my monitors, the telemetry for Transport 12 showed a sustained drag coefficient that was 12% higher than the midday baseline. Marcus wasn't lifting his foot from the accelerator pedal. He was using 40 tons of American manufacturing to clear a physical path through 300 waking organisms that had chosen the wrong afternoon to leave the drainage ditches. The windshield wipers on his rig were operating at maximum speed, slicing through a layer of dark, cold fluids that threatened to blind his forward-looking optical sensors. Behind him, the 6 remaining trucks in the line stayed within a 3-meter drafting gap, their engines roaring in a tight acoustic knot that kept the local air vibrating. At exactly 2:11 in the afternoon, the fuel sensor for Transport 15 triggered a yellow alert on my master console. The driver was Alina, an operator who had survived 3 winter cycles by being cautious. But caution is a structural flaw when you are operating under a compressed timeline. Her engine had been left running during the 20-minute clearance at the jackknife site, an unnecessary expenditure of resources that had corrupted her return trip calculations. The display showed she had exactly 14 gallons of diesel left in her primary tank, with 45 miles of open asphalt remaining before the sector gates. The radio channel remained silent because the drivers knew I was monitoring the fuel depletion curve in real time. They were waiting for the math to speak. Alina was the first to break protocol. Her voice was steady, but the frequency was tight, clipping against the static of the local relay tower. She asked Marcus if they could perform a rolling fuel transfer at the next level straightaway, using a high-pressure line from Transport 14 while maintaining a speed of 40 miles per hour. It was a maneuver that had been executed twice during the spring logistics trials, but those trials had taken place under full UV illumination, when the night shift was still locked in its catatonic state beneath the soil. Marcus didn't answer her. He knew that even a rolling transfer dropped the convoy's average velocity to 44 miles per hour over a 3-mile stretch. According to the atomic clock on my desk, that 3-mile reduction would push the arrival time at the outer perimeter to 4:17. The blast doors at Sector 4 are controlled by a hard-coded mechanical program that drops 20-ton steel slabs into the tracks at precisely 4:15, regardless of who is standing on the approach. The system is designed to preserve the integrity of the manufacturing core from the atmospheric pressure shift that occurs when the sun drops behind the western ridge. It doesn't have an override for human error. I leaned into the microphone, my fingers adjusting the audio gain to suppress the drone of the ventilation system behind me. I told Transport 15 that her request was denied. The protocol for a suboptimal fuel reserve during a code red atmospheric shift is immediate asset abandonment. I ordered the remaining trucks to maintain their current formation and prepare to adjust their spacing the moment. 15 lost momentum. Alina didn't argue. In this sector, arguing with dispatch is an offense that results in the immediate cancellation of your family's shelter credits. She simply confirmed the status and told the convoy she would maintain maximum throttle until the injectors starved. Through the satellite feed, I watched the cloud deck solidify over the highway. The solar index had dropped to 3% of its standard values. The dark patches along the tree lines were no longer static. The organisms were crawling out from the undergrowth, their long, pale limbs moving with an awkward, disjointed rhythm that would become a fluid sprint within the hour. They weren't hunting by sight yet. Their enlarged pupils were still adjusting to the lack of light, but they were lining the edges of the concrete, drawn by the thermal emission of 7 massive engines pushing 70 miles per hour. At toot 26, Transport 15's engine sputtered. The fuel pressure gauge on my terminal dropped to 0. Her rig began to lose speed, its mass acting as a brake on the vehicles behind her. Marcus executed the bypass sequence without a single word of warning. He veered left into the oncoming lane, his plow clipping an abandoned station wagon and throwing it into the ditch. The other 5 trucks followed his tracks in a synchronized snake movement, their tires screaming as they transferred weight across the lane. They bypassed Elena's truck while it was still rolling at 30 miles per hour. As Transport 12 surged past her cab, Marcus's side camera captured a brief frame of Elena. She wasn't looking at the passing convoy. She was busy checking the lock seals on her cabin doors and turning off her internal dashboard lights. She knew that any illumination inside the glass would turn her into a beacon the moment the darkness became total. Within 90 seconds, Transport 15 was a stationary block of steel in the middle of the highway, 3 miles behind the line. The audio linked to her cab was still live on my secondary console. I could hear the sound of her manual air pump as she pressurized the cabin seals. Then I heard the first impact against her chassis. It wasn't a loud strike, it was a scratching sound, like a fingernail moving across a chalkboard. The night shift had reached her. They were searching for a seam in the metal, a loose bolt, a place where the insulation had worn thin enough to let a human heat signature leak through. Marcus called the tower on the primary line, asking if he should cut his audio link to 15 to preserve signal bandwidth for the final approach. He didn't say that the sound of the scratching was affecting his concentration, but his heart rate had risen to 125 on the biometric monitor. I didn't cut the link for him. I told him that maintaining the audio feed from the abandoned asset provided critical data on the density of the horde along the route. The truth was simpler. I needed the remaining drivers to hear what happens when an efficiency metric is violated. It was the only way to ensure that no one else lifted their foot from the throttle during the remaining 30 miles. The road ahead presented a secondary logical trap that the automated navigation system had failed to calculate. 3 miles before the sector gates, the highway crosses the Muskingum River via an automated dual-leaf bascule bridge. The bridge is managed by the Agricultural Transport Grid, an independent corporate network that moves unmanned grain barges from the northern fields down to the processing plants in the south. The barges operate on an invariant maritime algorithm that doesn't share data with the land logistics system due to proprietary software firewalls. An automated barge, designated Asset 904, was currently moving downriver at 6 knots. According to its schedule, it was time to trigger the bridge lift sequence at exactly 2:45, clearing the channel for its 300-foot cargo hold. My projection matrix showed the convoy would reach that exact coordinate at 2:47. If the bridge leaves were raised even 10 degrees, the convoy's momentum would carry them directly into the river channel, destroying 60 tons of polymer and 6 prime operators. If Marcus stopped the trucks to wait for the bridge to cycle through its opening and closing sequence, they would lose 22 minutes. That delay would guarantee their arrival at the sector gate long after the mechanical locks had sealed the perimeter. I accessed the Maritime Network terminal, attempting to input an emergency pause command to the barge's propulsion system. The screen blinked back an error message: protocol conflict. Land logistics authorization insufficient to alter maritime transport schedules. The automated systems were working exactly as they were designed to work, each optimizing its own sector without any regard for the survival of the other. The grain barge was maximizing its delivery schedule, the bridge was maximizing channel safety, the sector gates were maximizing atmospheric isolation. Every system was perfect, and the result was an impending execution. I called Marcus and informed him of the bridge metric. I explained that there was no software solution available from the tower. "What are the physical dimensions of the barge?" Marcus asked. His voice was mechanical now, his mind working through the engineering of the impact. I pulled up the blueprint for Asset 904. It was a standard flat-bottom steel hull, uncrewed, with a reinforced bow designed to deflect river ice. It weighed 1,200 tons when fully loaded with wheat. If it struck the bridge support pillars while the leaves were in motion, the automated safety sensors would trigger an emergency stop, locking the bridge in whatever position it occupied at the moment of impact. If the bridge locks while it's partially open, we can't jump it, Marcus said. The safety sensor has a 3-second latency period between the mechanical trigger and the hydraulic lock, I told him, looking at the engineering schematics. If you are on the bridge deck when the barge hits the pillar, the leaves will still be level enough to sustain your weight, but you have to force the barge to hit early. We need more mass, Marcus said. 1,200 tons of steel won't deflect from a rifle round. He didn't wait for my response. He clicked his radio to the local convoy frequency. He ordered Transport 16, the rear truck in the line, to increase its speed to 85 miles per hour, break formation, and take the lead position. The driver of 16 was a young operator named Caleb. His rig was carrying the lowest priority cargo, a shipment of recycled plastic seals that could be replaced within a week if the sector maintained its manufacturing capability. Caleb understood the calculation before Marcus even finished the sentence. He didn't ask for a confirmation from the tower. He pulled his rig into the left lane, his engine screaming as the turbochargers forced cold air into the cylinders. He surged past the other 5 trucks, his massive plow throwing a spray of black water and road debris across their windshields. On my screen, the satellite view showed the barge moving toward the bridge channel, its automated strobe lights blinking through the dense mist. The bridge leaves were beginning to groan, the hydraulic pumps activating as the mechanical timer hit the 2:45 mark. The steel seam in the middle of the highway was starting to widen. A gap of 3 inches, then 6 inches. Caleb's truck was 2 miles away from the bridge approach, moving at maximum velocity. The night shift organisms were no longer crawling, they were running alongside his wheels, their pale bodies bouncing off his aluminum side skirts as he tore through the darkness. The radio link to Transport 15 went silent at that exact moment. The last sound from Elena's cab wasn't a human scream. It was the sound of her glass windshield shattering inward under the weight of 30 bodies acting as a singular battering ram. I didn't log the loss. My eyes were fixed on the gap in the bridge deck, which had now grown to 2 feet. Caleb, Marcus said over the radio, "You have 60 seconds to alter the barge's trajectory before the bridge lift exceeds our axle clearance. You need to hit the western guide barrier at full speed. Force the barrier into the channel. The barge's bow sensors will detect the obstruction and engage the emergency reverse thrusters, swinging the stern into the bridge pillar." "Understood," Caleb said. His telemetry showed his throttle was at 100%. His heart rate was a flat 90 beats per minute. He had stopped playing the survival game. He was simply executing a sequence of physical inputs. Through the camera, I saw Transport 16 hit the bridge approach. The leaves were at a 5-degree angle now, a steel ramp rising into the gray air. Caleb didn't try to cross the bridge. He veered left off the asphalt and rammed his 40-ton vehicle directly into the concrete and steel guide barrier that protected the river channel from land traffic. The impact was a massive kinetic event. The front of Caleb's truck disintegrated, the engine block being forced back into the cab in a millisecond. But the momentum carried the remaining mass through the barrier, throwing 3 tons of twisted concrete directly into the water, right into the path of the oncoming barge. The barge's automated collision avoidance system reacted exactly as Marcus had predicted. The portside thrusters fired to avoid the concrete debris, causing the stern of the 1,200-ton vessel to swing outward in a wide, slow arc. The steel stern struck the primary concrete pillar of the bascule bridge with a dull, low-frequency boom that traveled up the river valley. The bridge leaves shuddered. The hydraulic lines inside the pillars ruptured under the sudden lateral force, spraying high-pressure oil into the river. The mechanical leaves stopped rising. They froze at an angle of 7 degrees, leaving a 4-foot gap between the 2 sides of the highway. "The bridge is locked," I told Marcus. The lip on the southern side is 3.5 feet higher than your current approach. If you hit it at 70, your suspension will fail on impact. We aren't stopping, Marcus said. The 5 remaining trucks were 500 yards from the ramp. They were moving in a perfect block, their plows aligned to create a single, continuous wedge of steel. They had 30 seconds before the night shift entities, driven into a frenzy by the sound of the barge collision, completely choked the bridge deck. Marcus adjusted his grip on the wheel. On the camera, I could see his knuckles turning white through his gloves. He wasn't looking at the gap. He was looking at the gate indicator on his GPS, which had just turned from yellow to a flashing red. The audit was down to the final decimals. The calculation for a 3.5-foot vertical misalignment on a steel bridge deck at 70 miles per hour is simple. It is a suspension execution. Transport 12 hit the ramp first. The front plow of Marcus's rig struck the lifted edge of the southern leaf with a sound that wasn't a crash. It was an explosion of hydraulic fluid and compressed air. The front axle didn't just bend. The leaf springs sheared clean off the frame, sending 200-pound chunks of tempered steel flying backward into the grill of Transport 13. On my console, 12's structural integrity graphic flashed from green to a dark, permanent black. The front wheels were forced up into the engine block, destroying the radiator and tearing the steering linkage to ribbons. But the momentum of 40 tons of moving mass doesn't stop because the suspension is gone. The truck launched, cleared the 4-foot gap, its undercarriage scraping against the exposed steel rebar of the bridge pillar with a screech that registered 95 decibels on my external audio monitors. It landed on the southern bank of the river, the frame rail grinding directly into the asphalt, throwing a massive plume of white-hot sparks into the unlit air. Behind him, 13 and 14 used the temporary ramp created by Marcus's impact. They cleared the gap with less structural deformation, though 14's rear tandem tires blew out upon landing, dropping its rear axle by 6 inches. Transport 17 didn't make the calculation. The driver, an operator named Vance, let's call him Davis, hit the leaf 3 inches off the center line. The left front tire caught the edge of the structural concrete barrier. The truck didn't launch, it flipped. It rolled 3 times across the bridge deck, its 40-ton polymer tank rupturing on the second rotation. 1,000 gallons of liquid synthetic compound coated the road, instantly solidifying in the sub-zero air into a smooth, glass-like sheet of plastic. The truck slid backward over the edge of the bridge and dropped 60 feet into the frozen river channel. I didn't pause to log Davis's termination. I hit the delete key on his telemetry stream, clearing 3,000 data points from my display to maximize processing speed for the 3 remaining assets. The time was 2:49, 31 miles remaining, 26 minutes before the automated perimeter lockdown. Tower, Marcus's voice came through. It was rough, distorted by the impact that had driven his steering column 4 inches into his chest protector. Steering is unresponsive. I have no front brakes. The engine is oil-starved. The oil pan is dragged flat against the road. But the throttle is still stuck open. I'm staying in the line. Maintain your heading, 12, I said. 13 and 14 are drafting your wake. You are currently acting as a kinetic shield for the remaining polymer inventory. Your drag coefficient is 40% higher than optimal, but your mass is clearing the road. The highway into Sector 4 was no longer an open road. It was a hunting ground. The complete collapse of the solar index had completed the transition phase for the night shift. They were out of the ditches. They were out of the fields. They covered the asphalt like a moving carpet of pale, hairless skin and elongated limbs. They didn't have the slow, heavy movements of the afternoon transition. They were fully optimized now. Their muscles, driven by an anaerobic metabolic process that produces no body heat, moved with the terrifying fluid speed of a centipede. They didn't try to bite the tires. They knew the weakness of the machines. They threw themselves in clusters of 10 and 20 directly into the radiator grills, using their own bone density to clog the cooling fans and force the engines to seize from thermal overload. Marcus's rig was a rolling slaughterhouse. The plow was completely covered in a dense layer of frozen tissue, but the lack of a front axle meant the entire weight of the tractor was grinding the road surface. The friction was generating a heat signature that my thermal satellite could see through the clouds. It looked like a comet moving across the dark map of Ohio. At 3 o'clock, Transport 14's engine temp hit 240 degrees. The radiator was completely choked with the remains of 40 night shift organisms that had been sucked into the intake mesh. Tower 14 is running hot, the driver, a woman named Sarah, reported. The computer is threatening an automatic thermal shutdown in 90 seconds. If the engine dies, I'm a dead weight in the middle of the convoy. Bypass the thermal governor 14, I ordered. Cut the wire on the secondary temperature sensor behind the firewall. If the engine melts, it melts inside the sector gate. You have 14 miles to go. If you let the software shut you down now, you are turning your asset into an obstruction. If I cut that wire, the block will crack before we hit the perimeter, she said. Then it will crack at 60 miles per hour instead of 0, I replied. Make the cut. On the camera feed, I saw her hand reach under the dashboard with a pair of wire cutters. The telemetry line for her engine temperature flatlined at 99% capacity. The engine was cooking itself from the inside out, the pistons expanding against the cylinder walls, but the mechanical drive was still forcing the wheels to turn. The 3 trucks were 5 miles from the outer gate of Sector 4 when the automated defense system of the sector itself became the primary threat. The sector's perimeter is protected by a network of 12 automated point defense turrets armed with twin-barrel 30mm cannons. The turrets operate on an independent tactical algorithm designed to protect the manufacturing core from high-speed surface penetrations during the lockdown phase. The software doesn't check for corporate identification numbers after 3:30 p.m. It assumes that anything moving above 30 miles per hour toward the gate after the light fails is an unflagged biomass threat. I scrambled to input the land logistics bypass codes into the defense network. The screen turned white, displaying a rotating security logo, Perimeter Security Protocol Level 5, engaged. Manual override suspended by order of the Regional Emergency Directorate. The systems were locking each other out. The logistics system was pushing the trucks to arrive. The security system was prepping to destroy them for arriving late. It was a corporate paradox executed in steel and gunpowder. Marcus, I radioed the lead truck. The turrets are active. They are painting your convoy as an incoming hostile vector. They will open fire the moment you clear the tree line at mile marker 3. Can you shut down the power to the western sector? Marcus asked. His breathing was wet now, the sound of blood pooling in his lungs. If I drop the power to the western sector, the manufacturing grid loses its filtration pressure. I told him. 6,000 workers in the interior will suffocate within 10 minutes to save 3 trucks of polymer. The trade configuration doesn't support that allocation. Then, what's the play tower? The turrets target the highest thermal signature in the tracking field, I said, looking at the technical specifications of the 30mm targeting systems. Right now, Marcus, your rig is generating an exceptional heat index due to the frame rail dragging on the asphalt. You are at 400 degrees. 13 and 14 are running cooler behind you. If you break formation at mile marker 3, you can draw the turret tracking logic away from the cargo. A long silence followed on the radio. The only sound was the rhythmic thud of bodies hitting the front of his truck and the heavy, metallic scrape of his dead frame against the road. If I pull right, Marcus said, his voice dropping into a quiet, flat register. I hit the old drainage ditch. The rig will roll. Correct, I said, but the turrets will spend approximately 18 seconds reducing your tractor to scrap before the targeting computer rescans for secondary targets. That 18-second window allows 13 and 14 to reach the dead zone beneath the turret elevation arc. My contract, Marcus whispered. The Tier 1 shelter space for my daughter. Is it guaranteed? The contract is hard-coded into the sector ledger, Marcus, I said, my hand resting on the keyboard. The moment the polymer from 13 and 14 enters the loading dock, your family's credit balance is updated. The system doesn't care if you are in the cab or in the ditch. It only checks the delivery metric. 3 miles out, Marcus said. Tell 13 to get ready to sprint. Through the satellite view, I watched the 3 lights clear the edge of the pine forest. The automated turrets on the wall of Sector 4 instantly spun on their mounts, their laser designators painting the lead truck with bright red tracking beams. Marcus didn't hesitate. He slammed his broken steering assembly to the right. The truck veered off the road, the front plow catching the lip of the concrete drainage ditch. The 40-ton rig flipped onto its side, sliding 300 feet through the mud and the night shift organisms, its scraping frame creating a massive, brilliant shower of fire that lit up the entire valley. The twin 30mm cannons on Turret 1 and Turret 2 opened fire. The sound was a rapid, rhythmic thudding that shook the glass in my dispatch tower. High-explosive incendiary rounds tore into Marcus's overturned tractor, detonating the remaining diesel fuel and turning the asset into a 50-foot pillar of white-hot fire. The targeting computers locked onto the thermal spike, dumping 300 rounds into the wreckage, completely ignoring the 2 remaining trucks that surged past the burning debris at 70 miles per hour. Move. Sarah was screaming on the convoy channel. Her engine was failing, the block cracking under the extreme thermal load, but she was inside the turret dead zone now. The guns couldn't depress low enough to target her. The time was 4:14, 60 seconds before lockdown. The 20-ton steel blast doors of Sector 4 were already moving down their tracks. They were 3/4 of the way closed, leaving a gap of exactly 7 feet between the bottom of the steel slab and the concrete sill. Transport 13, driven by Marcus's wingman, hit the gate approach first. He didn't lift off the gas. He lowered his head below the dashboard as his truck wedge-shaped plow slid under the descending gate. The top of his aluminum trailer struck the edge of the steel door with a horrific peal of metal, stripping the roof off the cargo container like a tin can. But the momentum carried the chassis through the opening and onto the concrete floor of the interior loading bay. 14 was 50 yards behind. Sarah's engine finally died. The pistons seized, locking the rear wheels and sending her truck into a sideways skid across the approach pad. The rig lost speed, sliding toward the closing gap at 30 miles per hour. "I'm not going to clear it," she radioed. Her voice was flat. No panic. Just a statement of a calculated deficit. The steel door was 3 feet from the ground. Her truck struck the outer base of the blast door sideways. The impact didn't stop the gate. The 20-ton slab, driven by massive industrial electric motors, continued to descend, crushing her cabin like a hydraulic press. The metal buckled, the glass exploded inward, and the telemetry line for Transport 14 vanished from my screen. But the cargo trailer, the 40 tons of polymer, was jammed directly beneath the gate tracks. The industrial motors groaned. The electrical current indicators on my console spiked into the red zone as the door tried to crush through the high-density plastic cargo. The safety sensors in the gate housing detected a motor overload and triggered an emergency pause, locking the blast door in place with an 18-inch gap remaining at the bottom. It wasn't a clean delivery. It was a structural failure. But 30 tons of the polymer from 13 was inside, and half of 14's cargo was reachable by the interior cranes. The time hit 4:15 and 0 seconds. The automated system in my tower chimed. A blue text box appeared on the main monitor. Logistics run completed. Sector supply integrity secured. Efficiency index 72%. I sat back in my chair, my muscles stiff from the tension. I pulled up the sector credit ledger. I navigated to Marcus's account number. The system had already processed the delivery from Transport 13. The status flag on his profile shifted from active operator to deceased contract fulfilled. Below his name, the shelter allocation for his daughter turned green. Tier 1 clearance, access granted. Room Ford 2, Sector Core. Outside the tower windows, the darkness was absolute. The night shift had completely swarmed the perimeter wall. They were crawling over the wreckage of Sarah's truck, thousands of pale limbs scratching against the steel slab that was wedged open by her cargo. They were trying to find a way through the 18-inch gap, but the automated internal sentry guns were already spinning up, their barrels' clicks echoing through the lower bays. The system had survived another shift. The inventory had been replenished. The budget for the next 30 days was balanced. I reached for my logbook and turned to a fresh page. I didn't write about Marcus. I didn't write about the boy on the bicycle or the burning tractor at mile marker 3. Those weren't logistical variables. Those were just the operational expenses of a world that runs on a strict schedule. I noted the fuel consumption of the convoy, the depreciation rate of the tires on the bridge deck, and the total replacement cost for the 2 lost tractors. Then I set the alarm on my desk for 7:30 a.m. The morning shift starts in less than 16 hours, and the sun always demands a full account. The audit is closed.